I'm in New York City right now, Lower East Side.
Lower East Side. Okay, great. Now, you did not grow up in New York City. You grew up north in upstate New York, and your debut novel, So Much Pretty, takes place in upstate New York. We'll talk about the novel in a second, but first let's focus on you and where you came from. Just tell me how growing up in upstate New York shaped you as a writer.
Upstate's a really interesting place, you know. I've written before that sort of the aura of a Grimm's fairy tale kind of hangs around it. It's not very populous. It's a place that sort of had its heyday in maybe like the 20s or 30s. But while I was growing up there, you know, there was sorts of like a lot of abandoned buildings, a lot of sort of rural detritus. It's an unusual place. It's very cold. It's very gray, and there are things that are beautiful about it too. You know, it's rural, so people who like rural life like it there. I think the landscape of the place had kind of an enormous influence on the way I see things.
Why set your first novel there? Why spend so much time internally in that space?
Well, I lived there for a long time. I don't think I have much of a choice about the internally spending time there. I think that's just kind of comes with the territory. Certainly, you know, some of the things I'm writing about, events like the ones I wrote about in the book, happen in a rural area, in an upstate area, you know, places that aren't so urban and populous. And so I thought that was a good place to put it.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to give away too much from the story, but certainly some themes that are a part of everyday news, sadly. And you as a reporter, I know, reported on some of those stories, things like violence generally and violence against women in particular. Why did you want to write this story?
I did want to write this story because it's a true story. I wanted to talk about the fact that, you know, when things happen to women, they're happening everywhere in the world. They're not just happening, in big cities or, you know, they're very, very, very common. It's an everyday tale. It's not a big mystery. It's not, you know, truly sensationalistic. When people talk about these kinds of crimes and these things that have affected women, they're, you know, in the news it's often reported as scandalous or, you know, titillating in some way or unusual. But the fact is it happens, all day long, every day, every single day of the year. And when things like that happen, I think it's time to examine them. There's a line in the book quoted by one of the characters. It's Orwell quoted by one of the characters, which is, it's the duty of every intelligent person to pay attention to the obvious. And certainly that's the main impetus for why I took on this topic and wanted to write about it. I really feel that we have a duty to talking about these things, putting them out.
Why write it as fiction, as a novel, versus doing literary journalism or something like that?
Yeah, good question. Really good question. I think a novel allows you to get into the emotions of each of the characters. And I really think that in a way, writing fiction allows people a space that they can go to empathize with everybody, with all of the characters, even possibly the terrible ones. And I think in the long run, that's something that is more effective than just reading another statistic. I mean, you know, I just wrote about this recently. I just wrote an article about this recently. Sort of the way that rape and abduction and murder are covered in the press. We have sort of an avalanche of statistics at a certain point, you know, like 39% of rapes go unreported, 1 in 4 women are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. But when you take a specific case and you can create a whole world around it and draw a reader in, then you give that person a chance to live something a little bit more than they would if they were reading it in a newspaper, or if I had decided to write it as creative nonfiction. I think there'd be much more of a chance that could become sort of exploitative.
I'm wondering if the characters in this story, and we see the story unfold through a number of different points of view, but I'm wondering if the characters in the story, did they exist for you in your own mind before the story developed, or did they come out of the story?
I think I started with a real clear sentence, and everything went from there. And it was in Claire Piper's voice, Claire Piper, the mother in the mother of Alice Piper. And it was the line, "All three of us walked in our sleep." I think after that, the entire book kind of opened up and unfolded. The narrative is based on something that's real. So in that sense, I had, I had not characters, but I had people who were present in my mind when I was writing it. So yeah, it's a tricky question. I don't really know if I've answered it. I think that it's a little of both. I mean, some people were definitely there in my mind. Some people began unfolding just through the language itself, and I think that's kind of how things work with me. The prose, often the sentences in the prose comes first, and then the quote voices of the characters. And once I've heard the character's voice, I know who they are and what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. You're certainly dealing with difficult subject matter and a difficult story in telling the story that unfolds in so much pretty. And I was talking with another author and former journalist, Carrie Brown, who teaches down at Sweetbriar College, and we just got on the conversation about interviewing real people versus the characters in your stories.
Yeah.
And so coming out of that, I want to ask you a question which I asked her is, in your experience and in covering difficult stories, who is more willing to talk, real people or the ones in your head?
Real people are always really willing to talk. Interestingly enough, I mean, I worked as a journalist for quite a while, and people want to tell their stories and people want to talk to you. I mean, they don't always tell you the truth, and they don't always give you the best interviews, but certainly their voices, the things that make them quote characters, those things people readily give away continuously. As far as like the characters in my head, that's an interesting relationship. I mean, I make them talk, I can force them. I can force them to talk, and then I can edit away the things that don't work, that sound too much like me and not like them.
This is your debut novel. What is the experience of seeing the book in bookstores, reading reviews in the newspapers, having a launch party, all that? What has that been like for you?
It's been really, really lovely. Hesitate to use that word, but it's been really very nice. My niece just texted me a minute ago to say, "I bought your book at Barnes and Noble," and that it meant a lot to me to have my family be able to be wherever they are picking up the book, and not having it be some sort of glued and stapled pamphlet I've sent to them in the mail. Some sort of DIY project. So it's pretty great. And the book party, the launch party was really fantastic. I had friends there who'd been my friends since I was 4, and my advisor from graduate school, my editors, and my publicists, who are ladies that I love very much. And my whole family was there. So it felt like a christening of some kind, a real celebration. It's just been a great experience overall. And the main thing is, I guess, I get to say this thing that I want to say. I get to talk about this issue. I get to have a platform from which to discuss violence against women. And I really don't think I would have been afforded that if I was writing strictly as a journalist. And I don't think I would have been afforded that had I sort of taken this, very indie DIY route. So I was just fantastically pleased about the reception the book's had.
Now, I know that outside of your own writing, you're a writing tutor, I think, at the East Side Girls Club?
Yeah, at the Lower East Side Girls Club.
So why are you doing that? And more specifically, or more generally, I guess, why do you think it's important for young people, boys and girls, to write?
I think writing's important for everybody. I think being able to be articulate and express yourself well goes a long way, no matter what you end up doing. I teach at the Girls Club. I tutor at the Girls Club, which I'm actually going to go do in a couple hours, because I live in the neighborhood. I live just a few blocks up from Avenue D, and so these are a lot of girls that I see around, and I know are out there. It's also, I think, really important that these girls get like a fundamental message of their worth as people who are thinking and that they feel that they can ask questions of anybody, and that they feel that they can express anything that they want, and that they have a platform to do it. So that's really, every time I walk in that building, I feel good, I feel great, and the girls, and actually a couple of boys who are in my class are all outstanding. They're just very inquisitive, and they have these really active intelligences, and they're good writers. I have a girl in my class that I'm going to see tonight who's sort of this innately natural poet. Like, she writes lines sort of unconsciously that have like a particular meter to them or a particular rhyme to them, and she's bilingual, and I think a lot of it has to do with just her understanding of language. So it's very, very exciting for me to be there, and I feel like the Girls Club, all kinds of organizations like that. I taught at a community college upstate for a while too, which gave me sort of a similar good feeling every time I went into work. I really think that's where everything starts. I think reaching that generation of people and making them understand, not making them understand, but giving them the tools to explore things and understand themselves, to express themselves. That's where change happens. And you have to have both. You have to sort of hit both fronts. I mean, like So Much Pretty, I'm happy it's out, and I want people to understand these issues, and I want to talk about them. I want to be part of the dialogue. But direct action is where it's at. It's nice to have a book out. It's good to have a book out. But you can't forget that, you can't forget the street you live on, and you can't forget the people you live among. And unless you're involved in some direct action, for me anyway, something's missing.
Speaking about action and your own writing, can you tell me what you're working on now and what lays ahead for you, fiction-wise?
Yeah. I have another book that was just bought. It's
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't know if we're going to keep the title. The title right now is Snow in Hebron, and it's a novel about a young woman who's coming home from a tour of duty in Iraq and sort of settling into civilian life, and she has her expectations of what home are going to be like are not met, and she has sort of an extreme reaction to that. And so it's about her life, and really it allows me to write a story that's kind of very much more about like family and love, and some really very more upbeat things than happen in So Much Pretty. Or less it's less sinister than So Much Pretty, but maybe equally mysterious, and ultimately I think more what people in the industry would call heartwarming. So really happy with that, and I can't wait to kind of get back to working on that a little bit more once things settle down a little bit with So Much Pretty.
And Cara, just finally, why do you write?
Well, I write because I'm wired that way. I've always written. I've written since I was probably 4 or 5 years old. There's a part of it that I obviously haven't examined at all because it's innate to who I am. Other than that, I do write because I feel that it's a social act, and I feel that it's an important thing in being a responsible, ethical member of society, to use the talents you have to say the things that are important. So for me, writing really is it's both a personal and a political act.
Okay. Cara Hoffman, author of So Much Pretty. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you so much, Max. This was great.